Hey, okay, finally here.
Okay, I hope this works. Is there an echo on your side?
No, actually, it's fine. Completely
It's fine,
fine.
yeah.
Uh,
All right. So I don't know how does it work? Do you need to like wait for a while for people to join, or you just start talking?
yeah, let's wait for probably few minutes.
Yeah, maybe let's just talk about like what are we doing, like how this idea of doing stuff like this has come about.
Yeah.
Uh, so basically, yeah, like our idea is to have open conversations in a public like forums because the like we often have very say profound or meaningful like conversations, and we want to just do it openly so that we know we can actually share our perspectives with the world, and also get more people involved in the kind of of I would say the conversations that we want to have. Some are gonna be like very easy conversations, but I think we should also at some point have more of like nuanced conversations
Hmm.
where there isn't a black or a white, where there is a gray involved in a lot of the things. So we'll probably enter into that. But yeah, we just want to do sort of have this open conversations. It's sort of like a podcast, but not really. It's more like people having a conversation, but doing it out in the open for people to see, and probably do it in a regular way so that it becomes a consistent thing, and we get into a habit of putting I would say our voices out and like our thoughts out. So that's sort of what this is.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I think like for both of us and also like couple of more friends with whom we study like design, it was like one of those interactions which added a lot to understand and actually apply things as well. Like you said about especially the nuance stuff, which of
Yeah.
course comes after, yeah, certain discussions. Then you cannot have those kind of conversations instantly with everyone, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's like a that was also one of the motivations to bring it up with more people. What we used
Yeah.
to have uh, over chai or over dinners.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so the idea is just to have a conversation, and if you guys want to join in, you wanna, so enter into the conversation. You wanna ask us something about what we're talking about. Please feel free to do that. So yeah, I think for today, what we're talking about is perspective of a design. Uh, Mainly talking about what we think of the term design itself. So it is, I think, in a way, a non-egocentric view of design. Like, how did your perspective of something like design as a term or as a field has evolved over a period of time based on
Hmm.
what experiences that like we have had. So, Vinay, like when probably this is also like a very good segue into giving a bit of like your backstory itself as to like who you
Oh.
are. But how did
Hmm.
you say first, like when was the first time like you even actually heard of the term design? Like what was your very
Wow.
first interaction with it?
Yeah. Okay. So, little bit of just background for even for everyone. No? I studied mechanical engineering. So in one of the universities in Mumbai, and the nice thing about it was there was also like a design school associated also, and I was part of a team where we were trying to design this, or we were trying to compete by making an electric race car. Um, and we were working as in mechanical engineers in that team, right?
Hmm.
But there were also a bunch of designers, and that's like the first time I came to know that there is something called design, and there were a bunch of automotive designers actually. So, and
Okay.
that was my first understanding of like design is like automotive design, kind of a
Hmm.
thing. So they introduced me to design. So that's also like the first time I heard about design uh,
Interesting.
properly. And
Huh.
before that, I think this word used to pop up everywhere. I don't know, like some articles, papers, even mechanical engineering, right?
Yeah,
But I think
engineering
we
design.
understand
Yeah,
it very differently.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty much how I heard of it as well. Like I think when I was very I would say you're young. That time, your design was a lot more related to art. I think in my head.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I would if like somebody were to introduce themselves as a designer, I'm like, okay, this guy is into art, and he has to be a creative person and things like that. And I think that's sort of what was like an inhibition which I also had, because I was like, okay, so I'm not an artist, I'm not a painter, my
Hmm.
sketches are not pretty. So I don't, yeah, so that's why I never even had a consideration of something like design could be a field for me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I think early on, like I chose engineering as a field, because I'm like, yeah, I'm a bit more analytical, I'm more into solving a problem. And that's why I didn't really think of becoming a designer from undergraduation itself.
Okay,
So
okay.
I think that my early interaction with the term design has been, okay, it's art field, because I think that time I was just aware of your design in terms of things like graphic design or interior design,
Yeah,
because that's what I think that's those are the terms that I came across.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think the perspective truly started to change for me very late, actually. I think towards the end of my engineering is when I really started to know something like industrial design exists, or something, or product design as a field exists.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was pretty towards the end of my engineering, when I was like, what do I really want to do? Because I think that's a very Indian thing, no? Like you do engineering first,
Yeah,
and after
exactly.
that you figure out like what you want to be. So I
It's
think
like you
towards the
find yourself doing engineering and then start wondering, what do I want to do?
yeah, exactly. So I think that's what also happened to me. Like I knew that after, so by my 11th and my 12th, I know I have to do engineering, because yeah,
Hmm.
Dimag is a bit analytical, so engineering is the field. But then I still did research, and I picked industrial engineering, because that's where the problem just solving, optimization and stuff like that was involved.
Hmm.
But once I got into it, I sort of didn't just fit in as well. I was like, okay, something is wrong, because, and I think that's when I started to discover that I do have a creativity inside of me,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just not expressed as art. Like I am really just a creative in solving a problem.
Yeah,
If there is
yeah.
a problem, I'm able to make use of my analytical skills to come up with
Hmm.
a solution. And I sort of started to see how there could be a creativity involved in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I still did not know how to freeze, like how to put, how to like define it and be like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's when there was sort of like a search as a period as to understanding what is design, and really trying to look for it. And I
Hmm.
remember it became like a sort of like a thing where I was trying to just watch like videos and stuff like that to really understand what is it that I want to do. Like if I'm able to solve problems in a creative way, what
Mm-hmm.
kind of a career I can have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was about when there was this Steve Jobs like video that like really say like it got to me, in which he says everything around you that you use in your everyday life has been designed by somebody, right?
Mm, I remember that. Yeah.
So I think that was the like moment when it really hit me, because I was looking at everything around me. I'm like, okay, there is a chair, there is this, all of these
Mm.
things that I use has been just designed by somebody. And I remember immediately after I saw that video, I walked into a supermarket and I was like, okay, everything that I see in this supermarket, somebody
Yeah.
had to sit and just think of every aspect of the product, and then began like a question as to, okay, who are these people like who do this, who are these people who really sit and they think how a product will look like, how will it work.
Mm.
And I
Mm.
think that's when I like I came back and I started to like look for who is the guy designing stuff for Apple. And
Ah,
that's when
okay.
I found like Johnny Ive, and then I'm like, okay, what is his role? And then I found, okay, there's something called industrial design. That's what like he is.
Okay, okay, okay.
And then I use that as a segue to really like do like deep down into it. And
Mm-hmm.
then with that sort of like a rabbit hole, I ended up at this documentary called Objectified.
Yeah, Gary has
Yeah,
with. Yeah.
exactly. And then I think after I saw the documentary, I'm like, yeah, I
Hmm.
know exactly what I want to do with my life, and this is it.
So that was your trigger moment
Yeah,
to really take it up seriously.
yeah, pretty much.
Nice. Yeah, it's very interesting. Like, I think I shared this with you before. Like, I had the same moment, like with
Hmm.
Objectified. It
Hmm.
was screened in the design center, like I mentioned
Oh,
in my
okay.
university. They
Uh-huh.
used to have those screenings. I think I forgot it was like Wednesday evening or something.
Hmm.
And there I saw this movie, and yeah, I think it's one of the really well-made documentaries. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it touches upon like different aspects of design, and but still, what I could take from it, also because it was like my understanding from uh, like automotive designers was key design is styling. That's how I used to look. I was still quite, limited or narrow visioned. Um, but still, it was almost like a really good push. Key, yes, this is something
Yeah.
I have to do. But actually, I
Yeah.
want to touch upon this. Yeah, like what you mentioned before, that you had this knack of creative problem solving. Uh, or, yeah, so I think that's also like a very much, it's an interesting thing. Like you have already observed this. And because usually what I have heard about the gateway to design is like styling or arts, right? But you
Yeah.
managed to see it as, yeah, this is design. This is like change by intention kind of a thing. Do you recall
Yeah.
any kind of like stories or I don't know professors, something that triggered you to realize this thing?
Um, I think it was a combination of just two things. So, I was studying industrial engineering, right, where they will
Hmm.
talk to you about how to optimize your big systems, like like in factories. How do you take away your bottlenecks and stuff like that?
Hmm.
And
Hmm. Hmm.
that time, I did have a professor who will really just come up with very interesting stories of like how people have been able to optimize our systems
Hmm. Hmm.
in a creative like way.
Hmm.
Uh, so I think those stories were sort of for me like very inspiring. I'm like, hey, that's what I want to do. And I used to then be able to solve a lot of the problems that like like he used to pose in the class on how do you optimize a system.
Hmm.
And I used to be able to figure out how to do those in a creative like way. So
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
that was sort of a first sort of like learning point for me where I'm like, hey, I'm actually enjoying this kind of actually I would say like a subject where I was always on time with those assignments where it requires a bit of a creativity in solving those problems.
Hmm.
And I think it was that aspect and combined with a lot of entrepreneurship activities that I was involved in college itself.
Okay.
So we had this entrepreneurship as a club, and where we used to really talk about, startups and things like that.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think it was at that point is also when I could see that I could really come up with, say, problems in form of startups that will
Hmm.
solve a lot of the problems that we have, like as of now. So if there is a
Hmm.
problem that is there, I used to be able to think, okay, there could be a solution for such a thing, like in this form. So,
Hmm.
for example, like one of the problems I faced a lot was with like the books, right? So, when you're in engineering, there are these like books that you have to purchase, and usually you can just ask a senior for that book.
Hmm.
But then, not like not everybody had such a good, I would say, like relationship with like seniors, so they will have to
Ah.
go through like a second-hand bookstore and stuff like that, where they do lose out on a lot of money. So there was a like there was like a pain point that I identified, and I built like a bookstore, sort of like as like a platform for like within like the campus itself.
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
those kind of events, like I think from an entrepreneurship and an academic side, it really just pushed me to, like, I think it gave me the confidence that, okay, I do have the creativity in myself. I think it's about the, like the creative. There is a confidence that a lot of us, like, we lack.
Mm-hmm.
It I think it's what the IDEO folks talk about a lot, right? How everybody
Yeah.
is creative, but there isn't the creative, uh, I would say, confidence in everyone.
Hmm.
I think that's what I gained towards end of, like, my college. Like, I gained the confidence in the fact that I can be a creative as a person,
Hmm.
and that's when I really started to look at everything else that I did consider as a creativity as just skills to acquire to express your creativity. So things like
Okay.
sketching, things like, all of those things which I still wasn't, very much the good at.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think I had a perspective shift that these things are skills to
Mm-hmm.
express the creativity in you. They're
Mm-hmm.
not a representative of the creativity in you.
Oh, okay. Okay, okay. I see.
So
Wow.
you
Okay.
can be pretty horrible at sketching but still be a creative as a person,
Hmm.
uh, or you can be amazing at sketching but still not be a creative person. So I don't think they
Hmm.
are expressions of a creativity. I think that, something like a creativity is a very different things from your like your art.
Ha, 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 ha. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think 5-year-old me would not have agreed, but yeah, now I completely agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. So how did so like yeah so I think then at that point when we understood what, something like a design is, I think even then the perspective was still, different because we're still outsiders, right? Like, we understood what is designed by end of our engineering,
Hmm.
but we haven't entered into it. We are still like the outsiders, looking in. So what
Huh.
just pushed you, like, to make the jump to apply for a design, degree as your master's, and what was that like?
Oh, okay. Arey, so I basically started taking lots of courses from this design center
Mm-hmm.
as a minor, or also an elective actually.
Mm-hmm.
So there I had this first taste of design, what actually it really is. So like the
Mm.
traditional design thinking approach, I went through that whole process with a course. There were a couple of more. Um, so I think, and also had a really good mentorship from the professors from this
Mm.
design center. And
Mm.
every time I used to talk, and this is like a new field, so it was like very overwhelming in a nice way. There's so
Mm-hmm.
much to learn, there's so much to do, and
Mm.
more importantly, well, everyone's like a problem solver in a way, right? Like even the engineer,
Yeah.
designers, and all. But like you said, it's this having this creative confidence or this moonshot thinking kind of a thing that I don't follow the, yeah, almost an algorithmified kind of a thing, like a very mathematical approach of solving things. But I am
Yeah.
ready to take a jump, think bit laterally, and say that this is a solution. Let's try this and test it. It's not like
Yeah.
we do uh,
Yeah.
a lot of research and something. So that kind of like confidence also started growing up with these small design assignments and projects.
Mm.
So actually, the final trigger came from a really good coffee with one of my professors.
Uh-huh.
So he also recommended me to go to Delft as well.
Okay.
Um, but mostly came from him. Um, that like while talking to him, it became more and more clear that I enjoy solving problems in that approach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he made it more and more clear that it's not styling, it's like a proper design, it's like a life skill kind of a thing. It's not
Yeah.
like it's like a discipline or something, but you basically try to focus or orient your intention and your skills in a more creative fashion.
Yeah.
um, so what excited me was that you are able to solve some things quite quickly in a way because
Mm.
of this kind of an approach.
Hmm.
तभी ठीक है, this was like just after or yeah, last
Yeah.
years of my bachelor's. That's what triggered me कि I have to do this.
Yeah.
And from a capability point of view, I think it also came from the fact that I used to love building things. So as a
Hmm.
child as well, I used to build things. I used to build like gliders almost like 2, 3 summers. For some reason, I just wanted to build a big glider and fly from, second floor of a newly constructed building. I didn't do
Okay.
it, but I was that kind of a person that I just want to build these things.
Uh,
And yeah, I also did some really random things. I think when I
hmm.
was in eighth standard, no, ninth standard, I built this paddle powered washing machine. I just saw it somewhere in the newspaper and I was like, I need to
Damn.
do this for my science project as a कुछ तो.
You built it, like the whole thing.
Yeah, I was in like a welding shop and
Damn.
yeah, like there was a model maker who used to work at my dad's place in the
Uh-huh.
office. So I was there in his office and I saw that welding is like one way to build the frame and stuff like that. And I can also upcycle these bike parts like the chain and the drivetrain and all. And also these tanks. We had an old tank lying around, the water tank, black colored
Yeah.
Syntex, if you remember.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So I
Rotomobile.
thought those kind of things would, yeah, can be put together. So there is no sketch or anything. It's just like in my
Yeah.
head. So I
Uh-huh.
basically asked this uncle around, ki, can I come to your workshop? Can you show me stuff, how to weld things and how to handle it? So he was kind enough to do that. Um,
Damn.
and so I used to do such things.
And how
Okay.
old were you when you did that?
I mean, this is like ninth standard, so
Oh, damn.
15,
Uh,
15, no? Yeah,
uh-huh,
15
uh-huh.
years old.
Damn.
Um, so such things I used to get myself into. I
Hmm.
once also started making this, yeah, like automated watering irrigation system kind of a thing, like with bottles and all.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So in the garden. So I used to build such things that I didn't do for 3 years. Like 11th and 12th was mostly studying for IITs and no time for doing such things.
Uh,
Also 10th, like for board exams. And then after coming to IIT, I joined a couple of clubs, but we didn't really do much.
hmm.
It was like too much of options and I was like
Uh,
lost. So I think for first 2 years, I didn't build anything. And just joining
hmm.
this electric race car team was one thing I was really enjoying. So I thought, let's just do that.
Hmm.
Um, so when
But
I
at
talked with,
the time when you're doing all of this as a kid, like you
hmm,
never put like a label on that as like a design, no? Like you were just
yeah,
solving, like problems. You're not
no,
really
it
thinking
was
about.
a purely play thing. It's a
Yeah.
purely playful experience.
Yeah.
So I used to get come some sort of kick out of
Yeah.
building such things.
Yeah.
Kuch bhi ho. I used to go crazy with these origami books, like complex origami books.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, there was a time, like I think 3 or 4 birthdays in a row, I was just asking for this heavy complex origami books uh, from my parents.
Hmm.
These kind of things were already there, but I had kind of
Hmm.
forgotten them. That
Hmm.
I used to get these kind of kicks out of building things. Um, so while talking to this professor, these things came up, and he put them into a different light, in the sense
Hmm.
that see, this is one of the core parts of this, like the curiosity that you have,
Hmm.
um, that also fuels your, yeah, your design aptitude in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot
And
of sense. And I think the mentorship is like so important, right? Because I think that's also what sort of I think got me over the edge.
mm-hmm,
Because by the end of my engineering, so there is a eight part is I know that I want to be a designer,
mm,
right? But that's just like like half the battle won. That
mm,
like what you want, and
yeah,
then became the how, like what do you do to become one.
Hmm.
So the thing that I do immediately is I start, like look up all of universities which are the best in the world for industrial
Hmm.
like design,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, okay, I need to apply to those. And one thing that they all require you is a portfolio of your work, right?
Oh, yes, I know.
And I didn't have anything to like to show for. Like I've done all of the stuff I did from engineering is optimization stuff, right? So there's
Hmm.
nothing to show that I built something.
Hmm.
So for me, that was like a big, almost like a shocker that okay, I'm stuck now because I don't have the thing to build.
Hmm.
So I'm like, okay, I'm going to give myself, some time to build a portfolio and
Hmm.
then apply.
Hmm.
And then I remember I just like went back to Bombay. I took internships with different artists, like whom I met. I was just really hungry for
Oh,
just designing anything.
okay.
So at the time it's like I met like an artist in Bombay who used to be into the design of the furnitures. So she will make a furniture from stuff from stuff like cardboard and stuff like that. So very
Ah.
like sustainable and recyclable things.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I just approached her, and that is the time that I had like learned how to make stuff models like in CAD. I
Hmm.
think that was
Hmm.
like a skill I picked up.
Hmm.
And so my whole pitch for her was that I will build whatever is the furniture that you're building in CAD, so you
Hmm.
can like show it to your clients beforehand how it is going to end up looking. So that was for me the pitch to her. And
Nice.
then at the time she's like, fine, you can start, but yeah, it's gonna be like unpaid internship. What you do. I
Hmm.
took that
Hmm.
up, and I really was trying to hustle my way in through all of that, and I did that for around 6 months. And I think
Okay.
that's when I designed like my very like first actual thing was like a bicycle, like a chair thingy. So
Oh, yes, I've seen that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So basically, it was a commission, like which she got, that there was a client who wanted to build a bar stool with
Hmm.
old bicycle parts. So that
Hmm.
was the very first thing that that I designed as a commission thing. It wasn't a great thing. If I would have to do that design again, I will do it in a very different way. But still, it was again the same thing. Like I went to like a welding shop. I was talking to the people on ground. Doing a lot of things myself, understanding how things are built, what are the
Hmm.
limitations of of the material. I
Hmm.
was going to like the chore bazaar every other day. Really picking parts. Going and talking to people and understanding. Like how to how to procure the raw materials and everything. So that was like like a fantastic experience in itself.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
then yeah, that's a point where I also sort of understood a distinction between art and also design. Where I'm like, okay, I am say getting a satisfaction out of building a chair,
Hmm.
but it's still it's still I felt I think a bit I would say hollow, where I'm like, yeah, but at the end of the day, it's a chair for people like to sit on. It didn't really feel like I'm solving a problem as a kid. um
Okay.
so,
Okay.
so that's when I made a jump to a design studio, which was like in Bangalore. And I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
that's for me was like a pivotal thing, because first of all, there was no design studio that was willing to like to accept me at that point. I applied to like a bunch of them, and I kept getting rejections from like a bunch of them. But then I met this one guy who was very much open to listening to my story and understanding, okay, I'm really passionate about this, and he
Hmm.
decided to give me a shot.
Hmm.
And I think he sort of became like a mentor to me. So then I ended up doing like a work there for a year,
Hmm.
and the kind of insights that I got from just him as a mentor, that's invaluable, because I think that's what really made me you understand. And I think like a lot of my approach and I would say a perspective to design is like from the stuff that I learned from him.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I think he had like super good insights, and the way he'll approach a problem is like from a very fundamental first principles things. He
Hmm.
was amazing as a designer, but his sketching was like shit. but
Mm-hmm.
it is it's not enough for him to explain to you how something will work. So he'll say this is a hinge, so it will not look like a hinge, but yeah, like you understand, what he's going for. And that's
Mm-hmm.
when you knew that it's really about the best ideas that won, right? So it is not about who had the best sketches, because he will at times do a design sprint, and
Mm-hmm.
then everybody in the studio will sketch out ideas. And
Mm-hmm.
of course my sketches would not be the best of the lot, but then he will still end up picking my ideas, because it was sort of like a way where ideas will win. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about how just nice the design is, which I think is what gave me a lot of the confidence at that point. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I also ended up just designing the first product, which was like a jari, which was sort of like a like a plastic thing that you put on a mug,
Yeah.
which is not like it's not I would say amazing as a product, but then the process itself of imagining something, sketching it out, building it in CAD, talking to a plastic injection molder, getting it
Mm-hmm.
manufactured, doing like like a campaign for it online, selling it, that whole a process was like for me, like I
Yeah.
think it was very addictive. Like once you do that,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel all the highs that you feel in that process, it's
Mm-hmm.
very hard to do anything else in your life but just keep on obviously chasing that high again and again.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm still doing.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Arey, but this just we are building on that because I think you loosely just touch the aspect of the business of design there, right?
hmm,
It's not like going just to like we were talking about building stuff. Before that, we were talking about having this artistic or creative confidence or way of doing things, and then you just yeah just talked about thoda sa.
yeah,
So is that
yeah,
something as well that you picked up over there? That you kind of started understanding
yeah.
where design is fitting with others out there.
Yeah, I think that's was sort of like a real, I would say, like a taste of what is something like like a design in actual like world. And I think for me it was super, I think helpful to do a master's after that experience, because I
Okay.
could really just put everything like in hindsight of how it works out in the real world, when you have a client, when you have a deadline, when you have to say build something out, when there is a budget, there is a constraint of
Hmm.
like stuff that is possible. I
Hmm.
think all of those things were for me very important to know, and especially
Hmm.
to be on the backseat and to observe how people are doing it. Like, how do you make a pitch to a client? How do you have the client pick the idea that you want, the client to pick? How do
Hmm.
you, how do you put like a price on something like design, because it is such an intangible thing. How do you ask for a quote? How do you put a price on things like that?
Hmm.
I think all of those were like very invaluable insights that really so helped me understand the business of design
Hmm.
from but from a more observational kind of standpoint.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, like interesting thing that you picked up about was that the sketching part, having these loose, low fidelity sketches to get your idea across. Na?
Hmm.
Uh, I was coming from a very polar opposite end,
Achha.
where it was like I used to hang out with lots of these automotive designers, and you can imagine their sketching skills.
Ah, ah.
Uh, it was also the process. I think the first which appealed to me a lot, and I spent a like lot of time dwelling upon. It was using metaphors, like bees, cheetah, or some kind of animalistic features into products like
Hmm.
headlamps and the whole form itself, the tail lamps and all. Uh, so there, for them, the sketching was like you have to get it really really impressive to sell it.
Hmm.
That was the philosophy there. Ki
Yeah.
if it is loosely done, also depends
Yeah.
on with whom you communicate. But if you are communicating within this automotive field with other people, you want to sell your ideas. There's really high stakes. Um, then you have to sketch to impress, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
So for me, that was imprinted, and to some extent, it drove me initially, I would say, कि I have to
Mm-hmm.
get better at sketching and all, to try doing that. But
Mm.
yeah, I had some conflicts as well because you don't just get good with sketching so soon, right? And if the bar is set so high already,
Hmm.
the ideas take a step back and you
Yeah.
focus more on the presenting the sketches thing. So it was a bit hard initially, but for
Hmm.
me it was like that. Key sketching has to be perfect. In fact,
Hmm.
up until Delft, when I studied my masters, like we both did, the first year when they started teaching this sketching for presentation,
Hmm.
there itself, I still had the same mentality,
Hmm.
I think. And it's
Yeah.
something that I picked some from you, especially looking at your sketches, that if we are communicating with other fellow designers and maybe
Hmm.
engineers or creators, it matters more that we are able to communicate these ideas.
Huh.
Uh, and
Yeah. And I think sketching definitely, like it helps. So there is no, just say, which like denying the, like the fact that if you have really good sketching skills, it's definitely going to help you a lot.
hmm,
Because yeah, when I work in a group, I do see people who really sketch ideas, like you're very well. What you're doing with that is you're decreasing the load on the observer to your
imagine.
like to make sense, yeah, to imagine
Yeah.
your design, and they are able to understand exactly what you mean.
Hmm.
But if you don't have like your high fidelity sketch, there is a lot up to imagination.
Hmm.
Then the onus is on that person to imagine it. But I
Yes.
think in a designer's like world, it works. So if you don't really have like you have like high fidelity kind of sketch, a designer will be able to take a look at it and imagine it.
Hmm.
But yeah, like if you are having to make a presentation of that to a client, and if the client is involved in decision making, I think then it becomes more like a presentation stuff
Yes.
instead of like an ideation thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very, so I think definitely. So, one stigma I always see with these, not stigma, it's not even correct actually, um with the presentation sketches is that it feels very complete. It feels like the design is complete
Yeah,
compared
yeah,
to if we make like really loose sketches,
yeah, yeah,
low fidelity. It feels like uh, yeah, it is not complete. So that gives like a wrong impression to anyone who is
true.
seeing. And second thing is, we had this exercise where we had to ideate with drawing. So like not ideate with thinking, but ideate
Hmm.
with drawing.
Yeah,
That's only possible with low fidelity quick sketches, right?
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
possible with very high
yeah,
fidelity. Um,
yeah.
and then we lose on that, and that's something which I think that really becomes a very intricate part for us. If because
Yeah,
we want to produce a lot of things, we cannot spend, consciously thinking. We have to think while drawing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's super interesting. And yeah, I think one of the things that happened with me when I was working also, during like in Bangalore, and I think probably the biggest insight I got from, the mentor at that point, it was that, as a designer, you have to be you have to be like you have to be like a generalist in like
Uh,
some sense. Because if you become an expert, so basically this was his opinion, which
hmm,
he thought that if you become an expert in a thing, then
hmm.
you're only just thinking of ideas within that you know, like
Bucket.
domain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this was something that actually happened with me. So when I was doing the design of like jari, right, like the thing,
Hmm,
and the way the design of that thing is, it's got like a plastic thing which has sort of like a C kind of like a shape to it.
hmm,
And the plastics guy who was doing, who was gonna do like the molding of it, he was like, it's impossible to do this in a two-part kind of a mold. You need to have a
hmm,
three-part mold. And
hmm,
that was his point. And I at that point accepted it. I'm like, okay, this guy is the plastics expert. If he's
hmm,
saying it's impossible, then yeah, it's impossible. And I went to Shanwa's office, who was mentor, and I'm like, hey. So I just spoke to him, and he said that it's impossible to do it. And
Hmm.
that's when he was like, yeah, but he is not a designer. He is a plastics engineer. He knows plastics, so he's gonna come up with every idea within what he knows in terms of like plastics. And then actually like
Hmm.
he sat me down and like he gave me like a lecture, which was basically about how it's I think like very similar to like a metaphor where they say if you have a hammer, then everything looks like a nail, right? So
Hmm.
he's like, if
Yeah,
you if
I
you
see.
if you if you have an expertise in a domain, you're only going to be thinking about solutions in that domain. So if you are
Yeah.
expert, you're like in carpentry or in like wood making, you're only going to think about ideas of how can it be solved by like wood,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
or with like sheet metal. So like he gave me an example of this other guy who used to do all of like sheet metal stuff for like the office.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then he actually like he gave him a call, and he's like, hey, I want to make a door stopper. What is the best way like to make a door stopper? And the other guy was like, yeah, we can just do like a fold off a sheet metal and put it inside the door, and it will be a door stopper.
Hmm.
So this was sort of like his way of illustrating that how a sheet metal guy is only going to be thinking about solutions with a sheet metal, and
Hmm.
how a guy who is doing stuff like wood, he's going to be only thinking about that, and how a plastic guy is only going to think about solutions which is possible within the plastic as a domain.
Hmm.
And now its onus is on you to have a bit of a knowledge about everything, so you don't become expert in one,
Hmm.
and then pick off each of them to build the best solution. I think that's where the creativity of a designer, it comes into frame, when he understands a bit about everything, and he's able to think of solutions that the others they are not able to,
Hmm. Hmm.
which was
Hmm.
like amazing. But at that point, I was still apprehensive. I'm like, yeah, that's nice as a lecture, as a thought, but I don't think it's a practical solution. And then like it's like he went back that night, and the
Hmm.
next day in the morning, like he came back to me with a sketch of how it's possible to do the injection molding with a two-part, actually like a mold. And
Hmm.
it was
Hmm.
such an ingenious idea that when I showed that to to the injection guy, he was like, "Yeah, this is totally doable." I'm like, "This is the lesson, right? Like, the expert is not the expert. Like, a designer is somebody who can come up with ideas that the expert is not able to."
Hmm.
So that's when I'm like, okay, that is what I want to be. I want to be able to be somebody who has a generalist approach to design
Hmm.
and can really be a bit of a creative uh, in that aspect.
Hmm. 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 I totally agree. I mean, this has like recently happened with me in my job as well. Same
Uh-huh.
thing,
Mm,
but there I can just frame it a little bit. The way I understood was, if I'm working with these automation, factory people who are going to assemble things, um, my job or my role is there to bring out ideas. So show them
mm,
10 different options, because the first day we went in, we showed the concept that we had. They're like, this is not possible,
mm,
straight away. Uh, and we cannot stop there. Okay. Like, there are like other things which are pushing us to do this thing.
mm,
So the next time we went in with 10 different basic ideas, but just 10 different ideas, loose sketches. Um, we tried to convince them, and there was like a debate if this makes sense, not make sense, because they, I think, had some preconceived notions about process times, like these
mm,
are the parts you need to make per hour and kind of a thing.
mm,
um, and the way they think about it was also quite different. They think in terms of units, but if you try and come up and say that if you think of it like not just one unit but like one continuous reel, you save time in doing this, that. So I cannot like tell you more into details, but it's more like uh, the role there was to come up with 10 different ideas and let them decide with their expertise if this is possible or not.
mm.
So we were not depending on them to make this happen and again come up with solutions. If they
Yeah,
did, perfect. That also
yeah.
happened later on,
Okay.
like with details. Um, yeah, like with assembly, especially for this automation, you needed some kind of references so
Hmm.
that the parts would go and sit, and then we had to think of tolerances and stuff like that. So they had some
Yeah.
really creative ideas there, uh, and that makes sense. Like I am
Yeah.
not there to see that thing
Yeah.
happening in the factory for
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and they do. So that's where I understood like he my job there as a is an more of an explorer. Okay,
Yeah.
I need to do that.
Yeah. 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 And how did that affect? So when we so both did the 2 years like master's degree,
Huh.
like was there a change in perception of your of your design in those 2 years?
For me, definitely. Because the first day I entered, for me, it was pure design thinking
Mm-hmm.
kind of a role. And I think because I was not so much exposed to the industries or working with other disciplines, like I was aware that it's a multidisciplinary effort, so
Hmm.
I should know my role as a designer in the
Hmm.
whole team and the whole process. But that was not there. So for me, design was the whole world. So that's like the
Hmm.
start and end. So uh, I had, I think, little bit of an arrogant attitude as well. Ki,
Mm-hmm.
it starts with design. It starts with user research. Like typical design thinking.
Yeah.
They say we have to work with other teams like engineers, researchers. I don't know, medical doctors,
Yeah.
marketeers, everything. But it was not clear for me, like who does what, how do we collaborate, to how much we zoom out, like because we do talk about thinking in terms of systems and all. Those are very loosely defined points for me when I
Yeah.
started. But I think when I graduated, those became they came more forward, like what exactly is systems thinking, the topics of sustainability. Actually, I realized more and more that is of a core importance now. I think that's also more of a personal thing. But
Mm-hmm.
from a design perspective, it was more of a systems thinking, which became prominent than solving very detailed, smaller,
Hmm.
more narrowed problems. So
Yeah.
that's like in like bit more brief. That's how
Yeah.
I would put
Yeah.
it. How's it for
Yeah.
you?
Interesting. I think yeah, for me the biggest advantage of the design, like course, like 2 year course was the confidence. Like it really, like every time I will do a project and I will come up with a design within of it, it will really increase the confidence I had in my own ability that I can do this right.
Hmm.
Because until then I was still, I think, a bit I think there was still a bit of an imposter syndrome, right? Where I'm like, am I
Mm-hmm.
a designer or not? I think I can do this, but I don't think I can. But then every time I will do a project, that will be like, sort of like a validation of the fact that, hey, it is possible. You can come with ideas, you can execute them. So I think that
Hmm.
was the biggest, I would say advantage of doing a design degree for me is that it gave me the confidence by the end of the 2 years. Okay, this is something that I am, so confident
Hmm.
in the work that I do, that I know it's something that actually could be executed and it could be useful by the end of it. And I
Hmm.
think for me, the one of the big learning during the 2 years was the importance of user insights.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think until then, before that, I always was in a conflict of like whether like what is the role of a user in the design of anything, right?
Hmm.
Because there is one school of thought which is saying user-centered design, where every design you make is gotta be coming from the user. But
Hmm.
then the other school is sort of like a user, they don't know like what they want, like the infamous like quote, if Henry Ford would have asked, like, what do you want? And then like the folks like would have said they want to have like a faster
Hmm. Horse.
yeah, horse. So I think
Hmm.
so there was stuff like
Okay.
that, like I was sort of in between the two things. But then I think that was something that I got a clarity on, is that there is a difference between a user input and a user insight.
Hmm.
And that is a very, I think that's probably the most important aspect of a design, is when you go talk to the end users and you get inputs from them, and
Hmm.
how are you able to translate those inputs into insights. I
Hmm.
think that's where the strength of a designer it lies.
Hmm.
So when you
Hmm.
go and
Hmm.
ask and you're like end user about a problem, that guy is explaining the problem in the way he or she is able to see it.
Hmm.
But now it's to up to you as a designer. How do you just distill insights from the words that they're saying to really know what the problem is and how do you solve it?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
that is I think that is sort of like what sets apart the good designers from the best designers, is
Hmm.
how are you able to to distill insights. So if you're just building a solution that a customer is asking for. So if a customer says, I want X stuff in my product, and you're like, okay, I have implemented X in your product.
Hmm.
That's not what a designer, that's not what a user centered designer is about.
Hmm.
It's really
Hmm.
about understanding why do they need the X, what is actually the problem that they are having that X will solve. And
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
just so building something that will actually solve the problem, instead
Hmm.
of just having to to build the X that the customer wants to be
Hmm.
solved. So I think that sort of is the biggest learning over the 2 years, when I look back, is really
Hmm.
understanding how do you go from inputs to insights.
Hmm.
And then after you have insights, I think the job is easier, because then you know exactly what is the problem that you're solving. But that inputs to insights, I think, is still for me the most your favorite aspect of the process of your design as a whole. And I think that's what I really, I think that being an expert is that was what the whole 2 years of the design school
Hmm.
was for me.
I can completely relate to it. From this, yeah, the like what you mentioned about like input and insight, the transition or how you translate or how you look at it, uh, from a when you start thinking in terms of systems. So that was very interesting for me. But actually, recently I also did this user research study where we were
Mm-hmm.
comparing the subscription models to paying like yearly or something,
Mm-hmm.
just buying it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just wanted to bring out this example I recently came across. So most like the users were looking for monthly payments, so like monthly based payment for the subscription. They are
Yeah.
like, we do not want yearly annual payments kind of a thing.
Okay.
And this is like a meta level user research for different kind of subscriptions, like be it whatever. I don't know if you have are renting your electronics like smartphones, or you have some apps on your phone which you are subscribing. So we just wanted to study or analyze why or how, first of all,
Hmm.
what kind of subscriptions they have,
Hmm.
how they want to prefer and all. So that was the input. Like most of them prefer to do it monthly.
Hmm.
Um, and while digging more, we had like some freestyle interview questions, thought to say. And then
Hmm.
we understood that it was more to do with having the sense of control than saving money. So they are okay with spending more because they do with most of the monthly payments.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
more that they want to have a sense of control to cancel it
Yeah.
anytime if they do not see any kind of value for the money they put
Hmm.
in.
Hmm.
So, like for me, this was like a nice example
Yeah.
after you mentioned this
Yeah. Yeah.
input
For
and
sure.
insight thing.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. No, that's
and
exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
and once you know that, and it becomes very easier to design anything because you have like a direction and a vision of taking decisions on behalf of them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. That's a like a very good example. So now you don't just have to just say remove annual subscription, because that's what the
Hmm.
customer was asking for. But now you have a deeper understanding about the problem,
Hmm.
and you can actually think of solving it in other ways than just you're removing the annual subscription. You can now really explore how can I give more of a control to the end users,
Yeah.
which opens up so many more opportunities than just
Hmm.
you're acting on the inputs itself.
Exactly. I mean, it just not informs your subscription kind of feature, it would inform other features as well.
Hmm.
Because you went a little bit more deep, or I would say a bit more abstract with the inputs.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something that's, yeah, I really, really enjoy as well these days with designing things. And other thing I wanted to point out was this system kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Especially with materials. That's what I'm getting into these days a lot, like
Okay.
sustainable materials and all.
Hmm.
Um, and over there, it really, really, so of course, you know about greenwashing and all. No? So there
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
these green materials, etc. But yeah, it's more to do with just understanding your materials, whatever you want to use. So, for
Hmm.
example, like plastic is the most sustainable material ever, right?
Hmm.
uh, if you think about it, if you use it right, uh, it
Single
doesn't
use.
degrade.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. And the other side I can point out is if you use a biodegradable material for your
Hmm.
products, it
Hmm.
seems it's highly sustainable and all. But if it
Hmm.
is ending up in a landfill among other plastics, it has no value. It is
Okay.
still
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
worse, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's where I wanted to point out, like, because of this Delft education, I started thinking about these systems, and you really have
Hmm.
to track down how these materials are going into, where they are going into, have the
Yeah.
good understanding,
Yeah.
and then that informs your decisions. Ki it just becomes more and more clear what
Yeah.
materials you want to use, what are the processes going around, how it is being distributed. Um, so there's one more example I wanted to point out this with the packaging thing.
Uh-huh.
So just by reducing um, certain volume,
Hmm.
you cut down on the warehouse space, or you cut down on the shipping volumes. For example, you can ship
Hmm.
more of them, etc.
Yeah.
So if you have that kind of an insight,
Yeah.
that already informs your design, that it has to be, for example, it should be lightweight, it reduces fuel for the ship, it has
Hmm.
to be less volume, it reduces the cost for running the warehouses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So those kind of insights I never used to have before. It was like,
Yeah.
I have this packaging design project coming in, I have a brief, I
Yeah.
know what sort of vision the client has, then I just need to do it. But
Yeah.
now I just break it down entirely, look at the whole life cycle, look at it in the parts, and then I get lots of insights from there. Uh,
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, which is I think it brings us to the like the final I would say like phase of design, right? So in the beginning you were just with kids, then we got a bit of introduction into something like design, and then we did a 2 year design degree, then that evolved, and now we are doing it as a profession, almost like,
hmm,
and in very I would say uh, like in different ways. So like you are now doing it as as a part of a studio where you're talking with the clients every day, really doing the
hmm,
design element of it. And for me now it's become a bit more of a product as a focus, where
hmm,
I'm
hmm,
just
hmm, hmm,
focusing on like one thing.
hmm.
So with the last 50 seconds are remaining in our stream, like what would be your final conclusion on now I would say journey of the design itself?
Conclusion. I think the well, the start was, I don't see the start was right for me. Like understanding this design as just an transportation automotive design. I think that skewed me a lot. That probably put me in a different direction. Uh, but like having these courses and having this professor as a mentor really helped me initially to filter out and get some kind of a direction. And then Delph definitely helped me just hone those kind of understanding of design more.